And here's why. Humans practice both deception and self-deception. Research shows that we're better at deception than we are at deception detection. That is, we can lie slightly better than we can detect other people lying to us. However, we're decent at lie detectors. Deceivers that continue to deceive consistently with the same people get caught. That's what happens. They get caught eventually. Research also shows that the normal cues we give off when we are attempting to deceive others, are less likely to be expressed if you actually believe the lie yourself. See, what we're looking for are these little behavioral cues. And I did a show with an expert on this, so-called expert. Nobody's that good at it, but she was showing me what to look for. If somebody's lying, they break the gaze, they don't make as much eye contact with you, they take a deep breath. We were analyzing Clinton's famous, "I did not have sexual relations with that woman, Ms. Lewinsky." And you can see him, he's sort of fiddling with his glasses, and he takes a deep breath, and he looks off to the... Now, not everybody does that. It's hard to be consistent about detecting lies like that, but these things are true, and that's what we're looking for. But if you believe the lie, that is, you don't think you're lying, your body is not going to give off those cues, okay? So in other words, it's not enough to fake doing the right thing in order to fool our fellow group members, because although we're fairly good deceivers, over time you'll get caught. If you're living with a small community of people for a long time, they'll catch on to what you're up to. Therefore, we cannot fool all of the people all of the time, so we assess through observation and especially gossip who is trustworthy and who is not. So it is better to actually be a moral person, because that way you believe it yourself, and thus you're not actually lying. You're not faking being a moral person, you're actually being a moral person. That way, that is, the best way to convince others you're a moral person is to actually be it, not just fake it, because you'll be caught eventually. Don't just pretend to do the right thing, actually do the right thing. So it's my contention that in those long gone millennia, living 99% of our existence in these small communities of hunter-gatherer bands of a few tens of people, immediate family and extended family in a small community, we actually evolved this sense of wanting to do the right thing. Not all the time, but enough of the time that we have these moral sentiments. And that those who were not very good at that eventually were excluded or excommunicated or offed, as they say. So I actually have a section on the book. It's amazing what sociologists study. There's actually a huge community of people, or huge body of literature on the study of gossip and what gossip is about and who gossips and so on. The premise of this is that in these communities, these small communities of about 150 people, and it looks like about kind of a magic number. It's roughly the number of living descendants a Paleolithic couple would produce in 4 generations. In other words, this is how many people they knew in their immediate and extended family and small community. 150. Archaeological evidence from the Near East shows that archaeological communities typically numbered about 150 people. Modern farming communities like the Hutterites average about 150 people. Studies on the military, British Army and U.S. Army in World War II, determined that the ideal company size was 130 in the British Army, 223. Within an order of magnitude, we're looking for those few tens to a few hundred people. The idea is that there's not so many people you feel anonymous, but enough people that you have some power. Same thing with the study of businesses, departments, and large corporations, a Church of England study. What's the ideal size for a congregation? You want enough people that fundraising goes well, we have some political clout in the community and so on, but not so many people that nobody knows each other and you feel anonymous. The reason for this probably, and by the way, that's the average number of people in your address book, so those who study this tell me. The reason for this is that our brains are only so big to keep track of that many relationships, roughly 150. Some people have really good social skills. Politicians are really good at remembering names. Most of us are not. If you can remember 150 people that you run into, you're doing pretty good. What has gossip got to do with this? I like this little editorial cartoon from Bill Reckon and Don Wilder. All you've done today is gossip. Well, you gossip too. I don't gossip. I transmit pertinent data via a verbal mode. And that's what gossip really is. Those who study gossip know that it's mostly about other people, and who's sleeping with who, and who has power, and who doesn't, and who has high status, and who's doing who and whatnot, and who's doing what. It's about relationships, human relationships. That's why you're not supposed to do it, because we're supposed to talk about ideas as higher is higher in the hierarchy of importance, but it's not really. What people really want to talk about is other people. Why? Because that's how you find out who's a deceiver, who's a cooperator, who's a competitor, who's excessively greedy, who we can really count on. One of the things that religion does really well is by having all those rituals. If I see you in the pews on Sunday and you're wearing the cap and you're not eating meat or whatever the ritual is, it doesn't really matter. The ritual is irrelevant. It's doing the ritual that tells me you're one of our group. I can really count on you in a tough situation. You're a cooperator. If you're one of those rebels that doesn't want to go along with it, maybe you're not going to come through for us in our group. That's where these things evolved. Point 3, we're almost halfway there. An evolved moral social structure. So basically I'm saying that these things evolved because we live in the social communities in which we have these different competing motives, feelings, emotions that have to do with self-survival, the individual, your own immediate family, your extended family, your kin, your immediate community, and so on. One way to look at this, this graph is a little bit complicated. These things are all in the book. Basically, this is showing yourself in the middle and who you're most likely to help and who's most likely to help you with expanding the sort of expanding circle of sentiments, as Peter Singer calls it. This is a kin selection. This is sort of an evolutionary model based on genetic relationships. So you're more likely to help your identical twin than you are your niece or nephew, something like that. You're more likely to help your own offspring. Your parents are more likely to help you than they are an aunt or uncle, something like that. This gets us at least to explain where morality would come from out to the extended family. But we have to do better than that. Because we do moral things, good things, especially for people that have no genetic relationship to us. Why is that? We'll come back to that. Another way to look at this is this little pyramid I created. It's just a metaphor, just sort of a way of thinking about these things. On the bottom rung, you have the individual, meeting your basic biological needs, food, drink, safety, sex, and so on. It's kind of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs in his pyramid. Above that, the family. Above that, the extended family, and into the community. About halfway up there, at this sort of level between the community and the family, there's a split, a divide, this sort of biocultural transition boundary, I call it. On the bottom, this is mostly our evolutionary history. On the top, this is mostly our recent cultural history. By recent, I mean, let's say, last 10,000 years or so. This is where all these emotions are operating. There's very few moral emotions operating up here. So the idea of saving the biosphere, bio-altruism, biophilia, the love of other species, saving the planet, none of these things evolved. These require considerable social pressures on individuals, because we have to remember we evolved as this small primate on an African savanna, thinking in terms of days, months, maybe a few years, maybe a few tens of years for the entire lifespan. We're not evolved to think about what the environment's going to be like in 10,000 years. That requires culture and history. It requires social, political systems to make happen. So we have to look at those tensions between what we immediately need for ourselves and what the long-term goals are, which are hard for us to think about. So where would morality then have come from, what we think of morality? So within a rough order of magnitude, I look at the evolution of humans this way. 100,000 years ago, let's just say Homo sapiens, our species, begins roughly 100,000 years ago, maybe a little bit earlier than that, 150 maybe, but just say 100,000 to 10,000 years ago. We lived in small bands of tens to hundreds of individuals. 10,000 to 5,000 years ago, in these tribes of hundreds to thousands of individuals. 5,000 to roughly 3,000 years ago, chiefdoms of thousands to tens of thousands. And then within the last few thousand years, the rise of states of tens to hundreds of thousands of individuals, and most recently, large states and empires of hundreds of thousands to even millions of individuals. And today, one with 1 billion. Morality, as we think of it, moral principles written down, codified in laws and so on, all happen in that transition there from bands and tribes to chiefdoms and states. About the same time that religion began and political state systems began.